I was just doing heavy sled drags almost every day. When we were finally allowed back in the gym, my squat had blown up. My hamstrings were stronger within the next couple months, and my squat just blew up. And I knew that if I could keep my head straight, I would be able to squat 800, 820, whatever I thought I could do. Whenever I took my opener and it flew, I was like, today is the day that I'm going to take that squat record.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk.
Make sure you go to elitefts.com, pull up kind of the sales tab. You can send an email through there and ask for Matt. Otherwise, you can even call their customer service line and make sure they connect you to him. Matt will make sure that you get completely taken care of.
All right, guys, back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Leah Reichman, powerlifter and coach. The largest women's multi-ply total in squats ever. Best lifts 953. I'm not going to shortchange you either. Best bench 501.5. So I'm giving you the 0.5. And deadlift 635 and total 2055. So where we're going to start here is was it high school you played basketball and track and field?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So when did your sports career actually begin?
8 years old.
Okay.
I started playing basketball. My mom had me on a swim team for kids. So I did competitive swim starting around 8. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to do swim anymore. I want to play basketball. Switched over to basketball. Also played some soccer as a kid as well. So
track and field?
Track and field didn't actually start for me until 7th grade. So 13, 14 years old. I knew that I was strong, and I was like, you know what? I want to see if I can throw these things, this shot put and this discus. So that started in actually middle school for me. So, and then sports have always just been a part of my life. Something I've always been interested in, something I've always done. I've always watched, I follow, even if I'm not watching it, I've got the ESPN Sports Center app. So I always enjoy, I'm just that competitiveness.
Yeah. Did you play in college?
I did not. I actually regret that decision because, by the time I was 18, I was like, I want to get as far away from home as possible and I want to go party.
Yeah. So where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Cincinnati.
So how far away from home was that?
Well,
where are you from?
I'm from Northeast Ohio.
Okay, so it's
yeah.
Okay, I'm being an Ohioan. It's far enough away from home.
my dad told me you can go away to college, but it has to stay in state. So for me, I'm from Northeast Ohio, Dover, New Philadelphia area. If you've ever heard of it, that's like 3.5, 4 hours. So that's the farthest I could get away.
Yeah, pretty much.
While staying in state.
Yeah, exactly.
So. Yeah, and then I just ended up staying there. I remember actually in college, the track and field coach, the throwing coach, she tried to get me to throw at the University of Cincinnati. I was like, no, I don't think so. I wish I would have.
Did you know going into college that you wanted to study exercise physiology?
No, I actually thought that I wanted to be a physical therapist. So, I guess close to it. And then I realized, I don't want to put in all this schooling to be a physical therapist. So I did some of the sports medicine stuff initially. And I think it was year 3.5 years in, I was like, I like this idea of sports performance. I like exercise physiology. Kinesiology was really my thing. Great. I loved anatomy, just learning about the musculoskeletal system. So that was like, okay, this is really cool. When I graduated, I didn't think that the field for sports performance and like strength and conditioning for women you didn't see a lot of it. This was still in like 2011, 2012. So I was worried that I wasn't going to get a job. And it's a little bit easier nowadays for women in that field, but I went back to nursing school. And so I've been working in healthcare for a long time. And finally I'm like, I want to get back to what my true passion is.
Yeah.
So I do both. I'm juggling both right now. But that's kind of how that started. I was like,
how were you training during college then? Because this is pre-powerlifting, right?
Yeah, pre-powerlifting. I started powerlifting 2016.
Yes. So how were you training when you were in college? I mean, what was feeding the aspiration to stay in the strength and conditioning exercise science field?
Honestly, it was just like training like an athlete. You know what I mean? You would do your sprinting, you would do plyometric type work, still strength training, but more explosive, lightweight type of training. I mean, for a while there, I didn't even train at all in the younger years, because you don't really, when you leave high school and you're out on your own, you don't realize, oh crap, I just put on the freshman 15 because you're out partying, eating, drinking with your friends. And then I was like, okay, I need to get back to doing the things that I enjoy. So honestly, in college, it was kind of all over the place. It was more experimental. But I always liked the idea of training the way an athlete would train.
So then what pulled you into the gym before Laura's?
I was at a gym in Cincinnati called Vision MMA, and I started doing some boxing there.
So why'd you go there?
Why did I go there? Actually, it's because I was dating an MMA fighter at the time. So I got, I was like, you know what? That sounds cool. Let me try boxing. I got hit in the face. I got my bell rung. My teeth are bleeding. My ears are ringing. And I was like, you know what? My face is my money maker. I'm not sure I should be getting punched like this. And so I just started lifting, and I actually started seeing videos of Laura. And I saw another strongman training there because they had a big training space. And I was like, oh, this seems kind of cool, and then one day Laura came in with some of her CrossFit athletes. This was like 2015, I would say, just to train with Todd, who's the strongman guy there. And I saw her, and one of the guys there is like, that's the strongest woman in the world. I'm like, no way. And he goes, yeah. So of course, start looking all over social media. I need to find everything out about this. And then I'm like, what is powerlifting? This seems kind of cool. And then I researched it some more. I had a friend. He was like, I met this guy at a strongman competition. He says he wants to teach us some squat mechanics. We should go check it out. So I did. His name is JD Markham at Florence Barbell. I was too nervous to approach Laura. So I went there. I, started powerlifting. It was all conjugate programming. And I had my first powerlifting meet, about 6 months of doing like programming.
That was raw. How'd that go?
My squat was 400. My bench, I believe, was only 180. And I think my deadlift was right around 400.
How was the experience for you?
It was good. I mean, it was a local USPA raw meet, but I had fun. And honestly, I think that drive, or like that competition that I haven't been able to experience for years since high school, that really fueled me. And I remember, Dave, the literal next day, it was powerlifting watch. And I'm like, who's the strongest woman in the world? Who has the biggest squat in total in the world for a woman? Becca Swanson. So I even said to one of my training partners back then, I was like, I'm going to beat Becca Swanson one day. He's like, okay, so do it. And that's where it kind of all started. I did 3 or 2 more raw meets. And then after, because I promised myself I would squat and deadlift 500 prior to jumping into some gear.
Yeah.
And then it just took off from there. I eventually transitioned to sweatshop.
And how'd you do that? How did that unfold?
When I went there, one of the guys that used to train at sweatshop was occasionally training at Florence, and he knew Shane and Laura, and he's like, you should go there. Like, if you want to be great, like that's where you need to be. You need to be training under Laura. So, that's where I started going on Saturdays. Felt totally out of place.
How so?
I just didn't feel like I was good enough. And the atmosphere that everybody brought was different than, this raw USPA newbie atmosphere that I was around.
How so? Different, like how so?
More hardcore. Equipped lifters are just built different. They are just more intense in every aspect. They had training groups, and there was a pecking order. Right. With those training groups. This group is the big dogs. They've got the mono at this time, and you have to be under the bar at this time. No one runs late. You, don't do anything stupid or you're going to get called out in front of everybody in the gym. So it's like, it's kind of nervous, almost like you're walking on eggshells when you go in there. But eventually they get to know you. The girls there were always really nice. I didn't actually ever get to train with the sweat girls. But I remember looking up to them, Janine, Katie, Heidi. And I was like, I would love to be able to train with them someday. I jumped in one of their training groups or one of their training sessions on a Friday. I took off work just to do this. And I was like, I got my ass kicked. Those girls, the way they could train and move their dynamic work, their accessories, I got my ass kicked. And I was like, this is what I need. I could barely move when I left the gym. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it work with my work schedule, but I was able to start training with some of the guys that trained at night at sweatshop. And they kind of started showing me the ropes. A lot of my training partners have been guys, and logistically, it just always made sense. Oh yeah, I mean, I had a hard time, I was bullied. But it made me a better lifter because in my head, I'm like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to show you what I can do.
Bullied how so? Like just gym talk shit?
There was some gym talk shit, but also, there's some guys who I think felt a little threatened that I might be stronger or just as strong as them.
I'll say that the gym drama bullcrap.
Yeah, gym drama. I remember one person said to me, I won't train with any woman unless it's Laura. And I said, okay, well, here I am. So you're just going to have to deal with it. But eventually, the bad ones just weed themselves out. And it started to become, everybody started to have families and children, and you're all of a sudden you're the senior in the training group, and you have to build your own. And I mean, some of my first training partners, I'll never forget my experiences I had with them, because they taught me a lot, not just the dynamics of training, but the dynamics of that actual training group and how to be a good training partner. So
when did your first multi-meet happen then? How long after you got there?
I got there in 2018. My first multi-ply meet was 2019, the women's pro-am, 2019.
And how'd that go?
It was good. I had a 9 for 9 day, pretty modest. We made modest jumps, 9 for 9 day. My first, I think my first squat was maybe 650 or 680, but I knew I could squat 700, but everyone's like, play it safe, just get a total, don't ball them out. All those wise words that you give to newbie lifters when they want to go balls to the wall.
And half don't listen.
And then, that's the thing too, right? Is if they don't listen, then they're disappointed, then they never want to come back. So I think it's good to just kind of keep that drive, keep that motivation. Oh, I had a really great meet. I know I left some on the platform. What's next?
How'd the bench go?
I actually got into a borrowed shirt from Anthony Oliveira, and I think my bench was like 3 something. I really have struggled with bench. It was maybe 385, so not a lot. But it took a while for me to actually figure out how to bench press in a shirt. It didn't come naturally to me. Obviously, it's very technical and hard.
Yeah, I don't know about the 3. It's by far with gear the hardest,
the literal hardest, and it was something I was scared of because you see all those scary videos online of people just breaking their arms.
Yeah,
like, this can't happen to me. So, and then my deadlift was 5 something. So not a whole lot.
Yes. But
enough to be like, okay, this is cool. And
so how was that different than finishing the raw meets in your perspective?
Physically?
Not physically, just mentally. Like, was it way better? I mean, what was the difference for you?
Mentally, it was better.
Yeah.
Mentally, me being an equipped lifter had always been better than raw because of the mental game that you have to bring on meet day. Like you have to believe in yourself and believe in everything that you've practiced, because as equipped lifters, we practice, even on our best lift, we probably could have done something wrong technically. If you don't know how to use that gear, it's going to push you around. It's going to, throw you out of position. And you have to be strong enough to correct it. So for me, trusting myself and believing in myself that I have continuously practiced to perfect what I'm doing, even though my first meet, I was far, far from perfect. I haven't been perfect ever. But it was more rewarding to me. And also that adrenaline rush that you get from lifting that much more weight, that's undescribable. But yeah, no, I felt way more accomplished.
Yes. So after that one, with your sights still kind of on Becca's record, when did you think you were going to be able to get close to beating that from after that meet? Did you know it was going to take a couple years, or did it's like, I'm doing this next meet? How did that unfold?
I knew it would take a couple years.
Yeah.
I knew I had a long way to go. And Laura is always there to kind of reel you in, right? She's always really good at telling us like where we're at, when we kind of get a little ahead of ourselves. And my training partners are really good at that too. It was after actually shut down in 2020. I remember I was just doing heavy sled drags almost every day. And when we were finally allowed back in the gym, my squat had blown up. My hamstrings were stronger. And my lifts, they were, I really practiced technique within the next couple months, and my squat just blew up. And I knew that if I could keep my head straight, at the next Pro-Am 2021, I would be able to squat 800, 820, whatever I thought I could do. And whenever I took my opener and it flew, I was like, today's the day. Today is the day that I'm going to take that squat record. And I just knew it, something that I had always in my heart believed that I was going to do. And I was just like, today's the day. But no, it definitely took some time, because that was 2019.
Yeah.
Took some time. I trained with a lifter who's been doing this since the 90s. His name's Dayan Neely. He's married to Cosette Neely. And I started training with Dayan, and he is so technical. So that also, hearing different cues, learning different things from your different training partners. And of course, you have Laura kind of reeling you in. It was all just the perfect combination for success.
So mentally, though, you kind of went in knowing that this is a 3 or 4 year pursuit?
No, but I wanted to make it one.
Okay.
I literally changed my lifestyle for it. I worked nights in the ER, and my training was taking a toll. So I took an office job, 9 to 5. So my training would be better. I hate to say this because I tell people to not do this, but I would miss holidays with family. I would miss birthday parties. Because I had to train. And, like we talked about, I gained 90 pounds because quote unquote, mass moves mass.
Mhm.
And I really would live, eat, drink powerlifting and training. Because I made this goal for myself. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to beat Becca. And I just knew I could do it. I knew if anybody could do it, it would be me.
Well, what I'm seeing is that you didn't rush that process,
Mm-mm.
you know, where a lot of people will get into that. Then they rush the process. They get hurt. All these, they don't last long. You've seen it matriculate out just from being at Laura's. People come in, as you said,
Yeah.
the parents or have kids, whatever it is, life, it just spools it out. I think a lot of that is they're not patient enough to know that what they're really looking for. Meanwhile, while they see it, other people doing it is going to take longer than 6 months. It's going to take years.
Absolutely.
To be able to do that. Then you had people around you to reinforce that. But what it sounds like is when gyms got closed down, you got sent into this perpetual GPP phase, you know, which was, let's just say, exaggerated deload to bring up a weak point that you didn't know you were really bringing up.
Oh, yeah.
And then when it came back in, you're fresh, right? And you brought up your weak point. And so the base, you probably expedited the process by a year, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, had it still been rolling.
Absolutely.
Which is interesting, right? Because it's kind of like, hey, just quit training for, you know what I'm saying? You didn't quit training, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think that there is something in being said about overtraining when it comes to your body and how it perceives, you know, the stimulus that you're putting on it. I am a very big believer in take your rest when you need it. With the programming that we do, Laura would have extra, like, special exercise days, you know, mostly GPP stuff. And some days, like, I'm just like, I'm going to bed. This is my deload. Like, I need sleep, you know, because when you work full time and then you got to train, and let's be real, powerlifters, we spend about 3.5 hours in the gym, maybe 4, because of course, you know, you like the people you're with too. So it becomes like a little social, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, you're putting in long days. But it definitely, there's definitely something to be said about taking those deloads or just doing a GPP phase or whatever. But like those sled drags that I was doing, I'm sure my neighbors hated me, but those sled drags, those heavy sled drags that I would do, I firmly believe helped lead me to a very successful meet day and an all-time world record squat.
What squat bar weight did you realize that your recovery was being compromised just because of the load that was on your back? I
don't think that it really hit me until I started getting into the 900s, those overloads. Because, you know, for example, if you plan on trying to squat 900 pounds, your overload should be around like maybe 980, 985. And those, I'm just like, oh, okay, this is starting to feel heavy. For me, I think anything over 825 felt heavy, but it all felt the same.
Yeah.
Everything just felt heavy. I even learned, you know, as the weights got heavier, it's more about balance too, and controlling what you're lifting versus am I strong enough to do it? You know, that 9 or that 880 to 900 or 925 that I did, that was more, it's not that I'm not strong enough. It's more about, am I able to control and handle and stay balanced with this weight on my back? You know, I remember doing 925 at a meet at Shauna Mendelson's gym, and I was so far, like my pick was just off. My pickup was off all day long. And that 925, because Laura's like, let's just call it at 9. I'm like, no, let's go 925. I was so far forward on my toes and I could feel it. And I remember I felt like I was fighting for my life. And because in my head, I was like, keep your chest up or you could die. Keep your chest up. Like, that's all I kept saying was keep your chest up while I'm squatting. And I haven't had to fight for good positioning like that for a long time. So that was just like, that's where it really hit me. Like, okay, this isn't just about strength. This is about your technique. This is about your balance. This is about how you can handle the weight. And I mean, I got the squat, so
Yeah.
that's all that mattered. But
Yeah, but it was how it was in recovery mode to get it.
Yeah.
Right. To where if you would have picked it right with the balance, it may have been way easier. What would have
Exactly.
been way easier. It wouldn't have been as hard.
Exactly.
When you kind of started conjugate, then you kind of stayed conjugate throughout that whole process. So when you were at Laura's, what did your conjugate look like when you first got there?
When we first got there, it would be, we would squat and bench, or squat and deadlift, every like squat 1 week, deadlift the other week. And we would still, of course, do your 3-week speed waves, with your speed pulls. And then eventually we started to play around with things, and we added in a good morning, and we started going heavier reps on our, the 3rd week of speed. So it would be a deadlift first week, squat the 2nd week.
Max effort?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes.
These are max effort days. Yep. And then good morning on that 3rd week.
Okay.
That 3rd week, though, on your dynamic day, instead of doing your normal rep scheme of, an 8x3 or whatever for your speed work, you would work up to a heavy triple or a heavy double with that variation.
On the good morning week.
Yep.
Okay.
So your squat, that, we would work up to a heavy double, heavy triple.
And then the good morning was more repetition based, I assume.
Yeah, like a 3-rep max on max effort day. And I really started to respond well to that, because I think that good morning gives you a little bit of a deload. And then, of course, you're getting your heavy 2-rep max on your speed day. And then you just start the process all over again.
What about your accessories?
So they would stay the same. Laura loves volume, and I think that's good.
Yeah, she's known for that.
And some people respond to it really well. I did.
Well, by volume, define that a little bit. Are you talking, still 4 exercises, or are you talking 8 exercises?
About 4 to 6, I would say.
And then the sets are more than 2 work sets. Yes.
Yeah. And I responded to that really well. If there's one piece of advice I was given by a senior lifter, Katie Brent, she said, never miss a rep. Even if you have to lower the weight on your accessories, always do every single rep. And I did that. Eventually, you kind of realize some of the things that you need as some wear and tear happens, or, some weaknesses pop up. So you could change it up a little bit, but for the most part, the program was so well rounded that I didn't really have to veer away from that much.
And what did the lower body accessories look like for at that beginning part? Because we'll get into how it had to be how you had to regulate it for yourself as you got stronger. But right from the start, what were they change all the time. I get that, but what were some of the main movements for the lower body accessory work? So
if it wasn't a good morning week, typically I believe we would do like a heavy 4x8 for like a deadlift, or an 8-rep max deadlift, like raw, like a Dimmel or something.
Yeah, okay.
And then, you eventually start to taper down from there. So back attack, seated good mornings, usually a heavier posterior chain movement, inverse curl, 4x8. And then, eventually you get into a unilateral exercise. And then of course you never ever skip your reverse hypers.
Yeah. How do you like that unilateral exercise stuff?
I responded to it well, I think. It's not necessarily fun for me, because it's like once you do one, you do one single arm dumbbell row and you're breathing heavy, you're like, oh shoot, I still have to do the other arm.
Yeah, it's like double sets, right? Yeah. I call the dumbbell rows bodybuilding burpees for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, unilateral exercises suck, but they definitely have their benefits. And then, of course, you taper down, you'll do abs and a finisher. And for me, it's like, you can always tell when someone skips their abs because of the way their deadlift is like slow off the floor, or they can't keep they can't keep a brace during a heavy squat. And I'm like, okay, they're not doing their ab work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So never skip abs, never skip obliques. That's one of the things I did like to do a little differently was I like to train my obliques on my squat days, on my lower days, because that's what we use to push out against our belt. So I love to train obliques on those days. But
what were some of the movements that you like to do for obliques?
Backloaded, like just side to sides, like barbell backloaded. I like to hold a band and just really have it pull me. I like that. Copenhagen planks, I mean, those are rough, but they're good. Planks are just tough in general too, because like you have to remind yourself to breathe.
Yeah. Yes.
To breathe through it. Otherwise you're going to pass out from holding your breath the entire time.
Well, it's different too when you're heavyweight. So some of the things I'll see she'll have people do, the static sit up, twisting side to side. I'm like, there's no way a super heavyweight's doing that shit, not for long.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some things that, I had to kind of do what I could, but yeah, some of that stuff was pretty hard. She loves the decline sit up. She loves decline work. And a lot of people, even, some of the lighter weights, like they can't do that. And I'm like, is it because why? Like, why can't you guys do a decline sit up? So I'm like, is it because it's hard? Powerlifting's hard.
Yes. What about the upper body accessories?
Essentially the same. After a max effort movement, you would do a heavy 8 max 4x8 tricep movement, close grip, maybe a floor. Always some dumbbell work, especially on our speed days. It's when we really would hammer our dumbbell work. And then back in tricep stuff would alternate. For a while at first, I think our upper days were very tricep heavy, and our dynamic days were back heavy. And for me, I liked to kind of mix those up because Saturdays are fun and it's the weekend, everybody's in the gym Saturday morning, and I just couldn't focus on the back stuff that I wanted to. I wanted to just kind of get a pump. After my speed bench. So I started putting some more back stuff on those heavy upper days, and that seemed to really help for me as well.
So with the lower end, the movements that happen in the back half of the training session, how frequently did those change at that time?
Every week.
Okay, so they're always changing. So a tricep extension one way, then the next week just a different tricep extension. Same movement plane, just different movements, or entirely changing? I
would say different, entirely changing.
Okay.
You would have like a JM press, with the SSB for a heavy 8 rep max. And then the next day a Spoto press for a 4x8, working up to an 8 rep, or just a floor press against max chains, close grip. Or
yes. So when you go lower in the session, though, the push down type crap, is that the same, or is that changing every time too?
It changes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Her exercise library is huge. It is huge. And it's always something. It's always really, it's challenging, but you don't get bored with it. And I think that's what really just kind of kept my interest for 7 years. And I think that's why she's able to produce so many really phenomenal lifters.
So how did you hit those accessories? So not the main movement, not the secondary movement, but the accessories because you're not adding 5 pounds each week. So there's no real progressive overload that's happening because the movement's changing. How close to failure are you taking all these things?
Close. Every single time.
Okay.
I would start where I knew something I could get the reps in, and I'm going up in weight every single accessory or every single set of that accessory. And it's like, if I think I can do one more, let me just add an extra set.
Got it. All right. So you keep going up until whatever that rep range is not going to be achieved.
Yeah.
Or you don't think it will be on the next set.
Exactly. Or, or your last couple reps are like a struggle. I'm like, okay, that's where we call it, and we move on to the next. And eventually with the higher rep stuff, she has the finisher where you're doing like a high rep maybe 100 reps for this exercise, that's when you can go light, because that's where you're just trying to get some blood flow to help with recovery. But yeah, no, I would always push my accessories as best as I could to that point. And some days you're just tired and you can't, and that's okay. That's where the never miss a rep comes in. Even if you have to lower the weight on your accessories a little bit, just at least get the movement in, get the rep in.
Okay. So when you started there, were you doing the extra training sessions that fell in between the main ones?
No, I don't think I ever did. Honestly, I don't think I ever did. Do I wish I would have? Yeah, but
why?
I think for overall health and, GPP, there was a time where I was so out of shape, I couldn't make it through a full power meet without, feeling my best. And you see that happening a lot in equipped lifting, in powerlifting in general. People just lose their physical preparedness. And do I regret it now? Not really. I wish I would have, but no, I don't regret it. I wouldn't take back anything that I did. But it just didn't really fit into my schedule, because it's like on my off days, like I want rest. So usually it would just end up being walks or something like that.
So as you got stronger, then how did these things have to adjust?
Honestly, they didn't really have to adjust that much at all. I did almost everything the same.
So when the weights got bigger on the max effort days, and not all the speed days, some speed days are more exhausting than others. Anybody that does conjugate will understand. It's kind of hard to explain if you haven't done it.
Yeah.
Sometimes the week one is like a bitch and it confuses you because it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But when you're moving heavier weights, that takes more of a toll.
Yes.
On your nervous system and everything else, you just fucking shot. Did you force the accessories, or on those days it's just like, man, that's it?
That's it.
Yeah.
I've had those days, where, because some days, your squat days, no matter how many people you're training with, or, even just yourself, sometimes your squat days just take a long time. And, for me, it's like after 2 hours of being in the gym, I'm like, I'm done. I'm checked out. So usually I would have those days, or, when I would feel too tired, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I can push my accessories. I might do like maybe one, like the bigger, like that secondary movement, and then hit my reverse hypers and my abs, and just, maybe some blood flow for my hamstrings, and then just be out. Because of that reason. So yeah, I would say that I didn't always push my accessories on those heavy days, especially as the loads got heavier, but I would be sure to give it my all on my secondary, or my dynamic day.
If it's post meet, so you do the meet, then you're wrecked for 2 weeks, whatever. Then you kind of get back into I assume you're still training, but you get back, it's not the same. Then you get back into the normal swing of training, then the accessories are always hit.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to look at is how this phasic structure unfolds, to where a lot of people will say that conjugate's not kind of blocked, but it is.
It is.
Because in that one time, the accessories mean more than they did before the meet.
Yeah.
In a different way.
Exactly.
Right. Because now it's that conditioning, because you're in terrible shape conditioning wise.
Yes. Great
meat shape, but terrible conditioning wise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a thing.
How long did it take, if you were going through that time, to get that GPP back?
I would say about 3 months.
Okay, so a while.
Yeah. My plan was always to do maybe 1 or 2. And meet prep, I would just get so out of shape, because all you're thinking about is moving these heavy loads every single week for 10 weeks. And, you gain a little weight, your body's inflamed. For me, 2 to 3 months, I would say, is when I would start to feel good again. But maybe if I would have done those extra days, it wouldn't have taken so long.
Yeah.
But the way I had to plan out my meet schedule is, I'm going to always do the women's pro-am, and I'll do something in the fall, because I will not compete in the summertime. It's way too hot. Does the place have air conditioning? We have to know before we sign up. But that would give me enough time to put in a really good off-season cycle, and then jump back into meet prep again or getting ready for the next meet.
So what was it like on that day that you did break her record? Because it doesn't seem like you thought it was going to be possible going into it, but the opener, I get that, it's just there.
Mm-hmm.
So what did that feel like after you did it?
Honestly, Dave, that was like one of the best feelings in the world. My dad was there to see it and he was so proud. But it was just all of these emotions too, because this is something that I had worked so hard for. Like I mentioned before, I changed my lifestyle for it. So to finally do that on my second attempt, I was like ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best moments of my life. I mean, I'm sure if I had kids or got married or something, that would be
maybe
still. But yeah, that was definitely one of my biggest accomplishments.
Did you take a third?
I did, and I ended up going 880. So I broke her record by like 30 something pounds that day.
Mm-hmm. So then after that meet, back to the gym, is it somewhat anticlimactic? I mean, where's your focus then?
Well, made sure I always take my time off after the meet, about a week, 2 weeks. And I was ready to get back to work because then, I was like, okay, well, I just did 880. I think I could be the first woman to ever squat 900 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, back to work. Let's go. I mean, I was just kind of on cloud 9 for quite a while. And it was really cool because it's not that anybody ever doubted me, but I would hurt my own feelings whenever I would talk about something like, well, you have to make sure you're training right for it. And, my training partners would really reel me in. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I was a little cocky a little bit, just joking around with them.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone I think was really proud of me too. And it's like, okay, like let's get back to work because we still have more work to do. But no, the gym was just the same when I came back.
So the training's still in there. At what point did the training begin to beat you up? Because I mean, it's going to beat you up from the start, right from the beginning. So, but there's a tipping point where with the heavier weights, especially the weights that you're lifting, because nobody's done it before, it's different.
Yeah.
So the recovery is different. Everything else is a little bit different. And it becomes this, oh shit, I didn't know I know I got a muscle recovery, but I didn't know I had to recover from whatever the hell this is I have to recover from. So when did that start to come into play?
I would say when I started it was probably after I squat 900 pounds, because then I started to put pressure on myself. Because
how so?
I feel like everyone was so excited for me. Not just my training partners or, Laura, it was everybody, the internet. And I just somehow was putting so much pressure on myself that it started to not become fun. And mentally, I think that started taking a toll on me, which, if you're not all there mentally, physically, it's going to take a toll. I recently read a paper about how athletes in individual sports, like lifting, tennis singles, throwers, have more depressive symptoms than team athletes, your basketball team, your football team. And I honestly feel like because I was just putting so much pressure on myself and all of this like anxiety to perform well because of all this hype surrounding it, I think I slipped into that and my recovery started to take a toll as well. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, everything's hurting. I'm not what I used to be. I was having bad training days. I had switched up some gear too. So I was learning new gear and that was just getting into my head. Even though it's like, I know this is great gear. It's just the learning curve.
No, it's a learning curve.
So, but honestly, that's when physically I felt like, oh shoot. This is.
So do you think at that time though, that the physical wear and tear was actually more, or do you just think that your focus was more on that than it was the positive part?
I think it was more on that. I think it was more on whether or not I'm going to be able to perform or whether or not I'm going to be able to do this because all these people are really like hoping this for me.
Yeah.
And I think mentally that was because that was taking a toll on me. It's like I didn't really have as much motivation there for a little bit. And my body was feeling a little worse than normal. You know, there's something to be said about proper sleep, proper recovery, your cortisol levels, all of that. Like it all takes a toll on your training. If
well, what I'm wondering is your perception changes too. You know, so say months prior to that, maybe you do wake up with your back just as jacked as it normally was, but you're not focused on that.
Yep.
You know, you're just focused on, okay, whatever, you know, then you're focused on the bench day on Wednesday or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
Where if the perception changes and you wake up, you're like, oh shit, this hurts.
Yep.
Where before it was a whatever, you know, it's, how much do you think that played into it? It's a little bit of a mental fuck. I get that.
It is. It's definitely a mental fuck. And I think it does. It did play into it. I really do. I was probably in that space mentally for about 6, maybe 8 months.
What helped pull you out of that?
I really started, I would just get like sports anxiety, like performance anxiety, even before I would have like a squat day. And that never used to happen. Never. And sometimes whenever I would have a bad squat day, it's like they're not like my teammates weren't disappointed in me, but they were just, their reactions weren't the same as a good squat day, you know? It's like, oh man, I'm letting everybody down. But I really tried to just harness that by.
Were the reactions different though? I mean, I'm kind of in this weird place right now, you know, because I see other people go through that and they could be saying the same thing. Like they're just busting your balls, like nice rep there, you know, but you're perceiving it completely different.
I think so.
Yeah, so
I think that they were always proud of me no matter what I was doing, but they honestly, I think it was more of concern, like what's going on with you mentally.
Yeah.
Like,
so you're taking it different.
Yeah. But I learned, obviously I know it sounds silly, but like just diaphragmatic breathing, right? You know, if you start oxidizing yourself in your brain, you can think clearer. And living in the moment, like I know that I'm good enough and I know that I can do this. So let's just do it. And, you know, that's good. That's good enough. And honestly, I stopped social media for a while. I was feeling a lot of pressure from social media and people just watching me. I stopped posting. I stopped posting my training. And I really just kind of checked out of that. I mean, some people can do really well with social media. Not me. I don't mind sharing things. But it started to become a chore, you know, posting all this stuff. And I'm like, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for everybody else to see?
So by not posting, it kind of pulled you back into why you started this in the first place.
Exactly. And then, that's whenever cause I had planned on doing a meet, the Lexan meet, November of 2022. And then I was like, I pulled out of it like the week before and I was like, all right, I'm just going to do the pro-am. And then because mentally in November, I wasn't there. And then I was able to pro-am prep. I did approach it like that, right? You know, it's like, this is a squat day. This is what I have to do on this day. I'll take what I can get. If it's not a PR or I match a PR, that's okay. You know, that's one of the things too, you have to really wrap your head around as you get stronger is you're not going to have a 15, 20 pound PR every time. Like you should just be happy if you can match what you did.
Yes.
Or a 5 pound PR, like just chip it.
The actual goal is to just strain.
Yeah.
You know, so it's the weight at that point, it's really not that relevant.
Yeah.
But in your head, you know, if you can understand it, I guess that's kind of what you're saying is when you began to understand that, like, hey, it's not a PR, but I strained my ass off. So goal accomplished. Still mad, right?
Take it out on your accessories.
Yes, but still accomplished, right? So I think that's a big, big thing, especially with conjugate.
Absolutely.
Because the worst thing you could do is force it. Like, oh, that was really, really hard, but it's not a PR. I'm going to try another one. It will be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. then it's not.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just taking it for what it is on that training day, focus, I would, if things didn't go the way I went, I wouldn't dwell on it. I'd be like, all right, you can think about this for 2 hours and then you're done.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't even be that. It got to the point where I'm like, okay, well, this is what it is. Like, let's just go.
Well, during those mental phases of training, I don't know how else to kind of focus that. There's main check boxes that you have to check.
Yep.
And then there's like the other ones like, oh, whatever, I'm not dealing with that now. What were the main check boxes during that time for that training? Say it's a max effort day. So max effort exercise, yes.
Yes.
Main supplemental, the heavier, yes.
Reverse hypers,
yes. The other, fuck it, I'm out of here. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Because there's a bare minimum, and then there's the maximum.
Yep.
And I think that's another thing that lifters have to figure out how to regulate when they get, I always say, if you want to be great, you got to auto-regulate, right? You got to figure that out.
Absolutely.
But you can't be lazy either, because sometimes it becomes habit.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, but I felt good. Now you're mad about that.
Right.
Because you went home and you left shit and you're like, fuck. Then you're back in. But so on the bench days, what were the main check boxes there? The dynamic, max effort, yes.
Yes.
Probably the same thing, right?
Usually, actually on bench days, I could usually get through all those workouts. But if there were
fun. Right.
if there were days where I couldn't, it would be a heavy back movement, heavy tricep, something blood flow like rear delts or something, abs, get out. But yeah, we go back to unilateral exercises. I really pushed some dumbbell rows whenever I wasn't feeling my best. Just really pushing some heavy dumbbell rows, for like a 4x8 or something. And my back got so much stronger just because of that. Yeah. Because I was like, you know what?
Why those instead of just something easier like the chest supported row? Because they were harder?
They were harder and I wasn't as good at them. And I hated them. And I realized you have to do the stuff you hate to be good.
All right. So that's one of the check boxes that are in there for the minimum too. Yeah. Because you can't just do that. You weren't doing the things you just liked. One of those had to be the things you hated.
I always have to do the things I hate. And honestly, that's when I coach the kids, that's something that I say to them as well, is this hard stuff is what's going to make you better. Like the fun, easy stuff is not going to make you better. So I would choose something that I hated doing and I would do it.
As you're peaking for the meet, there's accumulated fatigue, right? There's a point where just everything's going to feel like shit and you just know it and you got to write it out.
Yep.
At what point did that peak to where you just had to write it out? Like 4 weeks, 6 weeks out?
I would say about 4 weeks. Right when you're getting ready for your circa max squat is when things are really starting to feel like shit.
So then how would you manipulate your recovery to be able to not let that get worse? Because there's the point where you just feel like crap. You don't ever want to feel like shit, right? Because then you got to pull out of the meat because it's not going to be there.
Right.
But it's a balance, so with that, was there more focus on nutrition, recovery? Was there anything that you would put in to be able to bridge that gap?
Honestly, I would, if I remember correctly, I would take more naps, take more naps. I would always remember to hydrate. I'm always carrying water around. I would always remember to drink my water. And at that time, that's when I would normally get dry needled, really focus on some recovery, dry needle massage. I would probably start getting that every week, right around that time, just to help move some of that soreness, try to start feeling better. And I mean, that's not going to fix, whatever else you're feeling aside from the physical fatigue, but it would help because you're not, constantly in this state of pain or discomfort. So I really pick up those recovery modalities, especially on those last couple of weeks.
How was your training leading into the last pro-am?
I mentally or physically?
Well, let's go mentally since we've been talking about that. Then we'll go into the physically.
Mentally, I would just approach it just as today is what it is. When I left the gym, I didn't think about it. Whatever happened, happened. And I'm okay with that. And that seemed to really work for me because I didn't overthink it. Wasn't thinking about powerlifting 24/7. I wasn't thinking about what I should have done versus what I did.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like,
was that the first meet that you were at that level?
Yeah. Mentally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, yes.
What do you think got you there?
That episode, I think, that little, slouch I had mentally, pulling myself out of that. But I also had some really good training partners. One, Cody, he is really good at just being like, just go with the flow,
Mm-hmm.
like it is what it is. You're strong enough. Like you just have to believe it. So having someone like that in my ear, every single day, because for me, it's like, I'm not going to bother Laura about this, even though I'm sure I texted her 100 times talking to her about this, my self-doubts. And it's always good to hear that, some of the greats have all felt that way too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, really good training partners who just like believe in you and wanted to make you better. And even if they weren't as strong as you but they supported you. And sometimes it's just, I would overcomplicate things. I think we as powerlifters overcomplicate things.
Mm-hmm.
We're just in there, just lifting weights, having fun.
All right. What about physically then? Physically,
I would stick to the program as much as possible, but it started getting to a point where I could not do all those accessories. And I wish that I could have, but my GPP wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially after handling some really heavy loads. I would just literally on squat days, it would just turn into maybe let's just do my reverse hypers, some belt squat marching, abs, and get out.
Mm-hmm.
But my dynamic days, I always hammered my accessories on those days. Those days are so brutal. Those dynamic lower days.
Mm-hmm.
But it's my favorite day because it's so brutal.
Well, it's with the short rest periods, it's because you're talking about athleticism over and over and over. You kind of feel more like an athlete then.
Yep.
Because it's hard.
Yeah.
It might be the hardest aspect done right.
Yep.
Of all the conjugate is that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're actually exploding as hard as you can just whiff through it. Right. And it's not that hard.
Right.
But if you actually put that force in there, it can wreck your world.
Can. And there's something to be said about training your strength speed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that my dynamic days are really what made me a big squatter, is being able to move that weight as fast as I can. And I'm not just talking about really making it look perfect every single time. I don't want it to look like shitty, but I'm trying to be as explosive and move it as fast as I can for every single rep. And there's something to be said about that when it translates over to max effort movement, because that is, I think, what teaches you how to grind.
Yeah. Do you think that you were more explosive than strong? In other words, if it's a bad week and you're overreaching and you're screwed up, you can afford to miss the max effort days, but you can't afford to miss the dynamic.
Absolutely.
Some people are the other, where they can afford to miss that, but they can't miss the max effort.
No, I would never, ever miss a dynamic lower day. It's just, unless it's like, I'm mentally or I'm physically ill and I can't get there. But no, I would never miss a dynamic lower day. Dynamic days are, I think, literally the main ingredient.
Right. What injuries have you had to overcome?
Honestly, I haven't really had any. I do think that's because of the type of training style, conjugate training, if you're doing it right, and managing, making sure you stay mobile, managing your recovery modalities, what are we doing to feel better? Of course you have your occasional like tendonitis or, I had like some SI joint issues there for a little while, but I would just squat to a high foam box until I started to feel better. Decompression stuff with that. But really I was lucky to walk away unscathed.
Yes. Did you know at that meet that it was maybe your last?
No, I didn't. It was always in the back of my mind. And, like I mentioned before, my goal was to always just have the biggest squat and the biggest total ever. And then eventually someone's like, you could squat 1,000 pounds. And then, so then I'm thinking that's what I'm going to do next. But then after that meet, it was just like the best meet of my life. It couldn't have gone any better.
Mhm.
And it's like, how many times is that ever going to happen again? You see, you see powerlifters who are doing this for forever, competing, and are they ever going to have the day that they wanted? And that just would be really hard for me, I think, to wrap my head around.
Mhm.
So I'm like, let's not get off of what my original goals were. And I accomplished that. So I'm happy. I'm happy with that.
Mhm.
I haven't really made it known too much that I was thinking that was going to be my last meet. And honestly, at the time, I didn't think that it would be. But I just like a few days later, I was like, okay, like I think that I'm happy with this. I feel complete. Like I made this goal for myself 7 years ago, and I accomplished that, and I'm okay with it.
All right, let's take a break real quick. Then when we come back, we'll talk about the coaching. I do want to talk about the main event project a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we'll be right back.
Cool.
I gotta pee. All right, guys, we got new limited edition apparel. There's 2 designs. As with all the limited edition apparel, it's only while supplies last. This is the Blue Illusion tee, so I guess you can act like you're stronger than you really are. It's an illusion. And the other one, work harder, not lazier, or you could just work really, really hard at being lazy. Doesn't matter to me. All that matters to me is that you support the podcast. So hit the link in the description or go to elitefts.com, and on the homepage, scroll down, you're going to see limited edition apparel. Click on there. Pick up your limited edition apparel today. Help support the podcast. Thank you.
I think most of us would agree that getting a coach is a great step forward that an athlete can make to make greater progress. What if you had a whole bunch of coaches and a whole bunch of driven elite level athletes and like-minded people all in your corner trying to make you better? That's exactly what you're going to get with the Table Talk Discord crew.
Would I join again? Absolutely. And I will continue to be a member of the Discord group as long as it's active. I've been a big fan of Table Talk over the last couple of years. It's one of my top podcasts that I listen to. So once Dave Tate announced that there would be a Discord crew, it was a no-brainer for me to join. It's been overwhelmingly positive experience. One of the biggest benefits of being in the Discord crew, form checks. I work out in my garage by myself. I don't have people to cue me, to correct me, to coach me, anything like that. So being able to hop on the Discord, post my videos, and having elite top-level powerlifters and coaches able to give me real-time feedback that, hey man, you need to tweak this, you need to work on this, do some more accessories here, has been a huge benefit. I've seen my progression as a lifter make jumps just because of that. There's so much info on the Discord group for the members, thousands of articles, tons of ebooks, and really the best thing about it, it's like you're back in the gym, you're busting other people's balls sometimes. At the same time, you're getting really good information. It's been a blessing for me this last year, and I really recommend it.
All right, and before we get into your coaching, I want to touch on the main event project because it started. Well, why did it start, right? For those that don't know, right? I think it was an Instagram rant that you made, which was needed to be made.
Yeah.
So how did it begin?
It was the 2021 WPO finals. And I did not mean to take away from anybody by making this rant, but the WPO men's champion, of course, had his interview, all of this stuff, this huge ordeal, but there was nothing about the women's champ. And of course, I texted, it was Dina. I texted Dina and I said, did they even offer to interview you? And she's like, no. And I said, okay. And I was super ecstatic for Dave. He's won the WPO every year. It's great. But we also want to hear from the other, the female competitors. So I made this rant, something about it, and it just blew up. Because I guess, I wasn't the only person to hear about it or to think the same thing. And then a couple of the girls, Amber and Allison and Tara, they are all like, we should do something about this. And then we're like, but we just don't know what, like, but there's something we should do, you know? And eventually, of course, they did try to interview her and stuff, but it didn't feel the same, which is whatever. I mean, you can't really go back.
Yeah.
But then someone brought to our attention that, you know, we think that there should be an increase in women's weight classes.
Mm-hmm.
The sport has grown very significantly, especially with female lifters. And what were the weight classes, like 97 to 198 plus?
Yes.
So you have a lot of women who are 220, 250 competing against these 198, you know, girls that weigh 199. And that's not fair.
Mm-hmm.
So Amber actually brought it to our attention. We're like, all right, she made this.
Well, you guys also looked to see how many women that actually were above that.
We had a ton of data.
Yeah.
We had a ton of data. And Amber started this petition. You know, we're like, we should get these weight classes increased for women. Mm-hmm. And it just took off. And then all of a sudden federations are making this announcement that they're doing it. Like, we didn't even talk to anybody about it. Yeah. They just hear that it's going on and they're like, yeah, we're going to increase the weight classes for women. And we're like, okay, cool. Like, and then,
yeah, I think they just weren't aware because it was just that way for so long, but they didn't have that many lifters. I'm sure as soon as they looked at the numbers and like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You know, there's way more, you know, I'm trying to think of when I was competing, there may be like 4 super heavyweight women or over 198 at the time. Now it's because I remember, I think Amber sent me the spreadsheet that you guys put together. Like, holy shit, there's I knew there was a lot. I didn't know there was that many.
Yeah. So
at the time I'm thinking to myself, anybody that looks at this that runs a federation that doesn't see this is stupid. You know, it really kind of was a no-brainer. They just weren't aware.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it was anything they were intentionally doing, but plus they're all greedy, right? So it's like, oh shit, more weight classes, more, you know, more money, right? So that's going to play into it as well. But that was a big thing.
Yeah.
That had to happen.
It did. And that was something, it was really cool. It was really cool because it changed, you know, women's powerlifting. And hopefully, you know, because women, we come in all shapes and sizes. And we've, you know, we're kind of taught at a young age that we have to look a certain way and act a certain way. And it even took a while for my family to buy into the fact. They're like, why are you always in the gym? Why do you want to get bigger? Why? I'm like, you won't understand. Until, you know, they saw what I was doing. They're like, okay, we get it.
Some of that's kind of a powerlifting thing though, too, where I think a lot of men will experience that, especially if you're serious, because you get this weird backlash from people that are close to you. But in my brain, it'd be like, you know, if I was in the NFL, you wouldn't be saying these things.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just, I just picked a shitty sport. You know, it just doesn't pay, you know, it doesn't pay the same amount of money.
It takes our money.
Yes.
We're broke because of it. No, I agree. They just don't, it's something they don't understand. It's something that it really doesn't appeal to the general population. Like, why would you guys want to do that? Yes. But no, I think it became more inclusive, and I'm pretty positive since then. We've had more, I think the numbers of women powerlifting has increased. Personally, for me, I really love powerlifting. I love men's powerlifting, but just watching what some of these women are doing, it's like it's women's time right now in powerlifting. You know, we may have a 165, 181 raw 700-pound squat soon. And you know, it's just really cool to see that all these glass ceilings that women are just breaking through. And it's kind of, you know, shoving those societal norms to the side. We're like, we're going to do what we want.
Mhm.
And now we're seeing it. You know, how many women, strongman competitors you see out there putting 300 plus pounds over their head. And that was completely unheard of just a few years ago.
Mhm.
So it's really cool to see all of these successes by women, like in strength sports.
Did you ever think about doing that? You know, the
Strongman.
strong.
I definitely thought about it. I've had people try and talk me into it, but then I'm like, is it going to be worth all the wear and tear on my body? Because I know those competitors get beat up. But I think if anything, Highland Games kind of appeals to me. Like, let's just go throw some random objects in a kilt and see what happens. But no, I've thought about that. I think it would be fun to do like maybe something local. See how I do. Just
how did the coaching the high school kids, how did that come to be?
You know, like we talked about, sports performance has always been my passion. And I mean, healthcare is great and whatever, but that's where my heart has always been. And I was randomly on Indeed, I think, and I saw that there was this position, and this school had never had a coach before for strength and conditioning. So I emailed the athletic director directly and I said, hey, I'm Leah Reichman. I'm a powerlifter. I have the biggest squat ever. I sent him the links to my Instagram, and he's like, okay, you want to come in for an interview? And we had about a 30-minute interview, and he just hired me right then. And it's been a little bit, at first it was a struggle. It's a struggle to get people to buy in. Not just like the kids, but the parents, and the coaches, because they just don't realize like, hey, our kids should have been doing this all along. You know, they need to be jumping. They need to be working on their balance and coordination. They need to be lifting weights. And I'm not just saying lifting like powerlifting.
Yeah.
But they need to be moving weights fast and explosive. And we need to be doing it year round. We just don't need to, you know, oh, we got a few weeks before the season starts, but I don't want them lifting in the season because they're going to be sore. I'm like, if they're programmed correctly and they're taught correctly, like that won't be an issue. So it's been a little bit of a struggle to get people to buy in, but it's getting there. And I think all of the kids are definitely seeing the benefits of what come from being in the weight room, which is, I think, the best part for me.
So you're working with all sports?
I am. All sports. Football right now, football is in season, or they're in their spring lifting. I've wrestling. Those wrestlers are built different. They are built different. And they're a lot of fun to work with. We have the school I'm at has a really good wrestling program. So their middle school wrestling program just started working with me as well. So, you know, you have to change up the workouts a little bit because you've got your 12-year-olds and then you've got your 17-year-olds. You know, some of them just need to learn how to move and use their bodies, even though they're wrestling, but you know, that's different than let's focus on coordination. How do you engage your core? You know, how do you keep your balance? I even actually think I have a 9-year-old that kind of comes in with he sometimes comes in with the middle school, and which is fine.
Yeah.
It's one of the coach's sons.
So how was your onboarding process when you started? Because you don't really know what you're getting into. And then you see what you're getting into. Because you have all these ideas.
Oh,
right?
Tons of ideas.
And I'm assuming they got thrown out the window really fast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When I had to break up a couple fights, that's when
shit.
Was like, and I remember I broke up a fight with some of the football players, and I went up to the athletic director's office. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. He's like, you can absolutely do this. And yeah, some things do go out the window. You have to approach the teams a little differently too. You know, you have a big group of football players, you need to be a little louder, a little more, like keep them all on track, because kids get sidetracked. And you know, versus your wrestlers, it's a smaller group of kids and they are already like dialed in, locked in. You don't really have to get them to focus. They're just there to be better. And I mean, of course, football is too. They just, like I said, they get a little distracted.
So how many will you have at a time?
With football, in this weight room, we'll have about 30, 40 kids, and sometimes the time overlaps with wrestling. So luckily I have the football coach who, if I program things, we go over it, he can take over, and that's not a problem. Because I have to focus on the in-sport kids for the most part. So I'll have wrestling, just yesterday I had about 20 middle schoolers at one time, and just to like keep them, they were actually really focused and they worked really hard. But it's just to be able to keep your eye on all of them, you have to make sure they're doing everything correctly. We're not loading the spine yet, but even just teaching proper squat technique, how to keep your chest up in a squat. And eventually we'll get to doing that. Goblet squats are what they get for now. Front, I just some balance with PVC pipes while they're front squatting with a PVC pipe loaded. And of course they have really good mobility and flexibility as kids too. And I'm like, you guys need to keep this, because if you don't, you'll lose it. And you'll have we need strong hips.
So are you structuring all this still from a conjugate perspective? Just regressed. Okay.
Yes. Really no max efforts, or if we do, it's like a max effort maybe every 6 weeks, maybe, while out of season. In season, no, it's mostly like speed dynamic work. And then, I will implement, if they're doing some squats, contrast training. So they're going to go directly into a jump movement after that. So a little bit of mostly conjugate, but a little bit of, some other things mixed in. You've got your isometric holds, your eccentric work, just for your accessories and stuff like that.
So what would be your main metrics that you're trying to increase with them?
What
in the weight room?
In the weight room?
Yeah. So it's not a squat, bench, and deadlift, but it may be, down the road, it will lead into that.
Yeah.
Are there other, as a powerlifter, you're training to build these three things, but you're going to use all these other movements to build those three things. So with your athletes, what would be those three things?
Squat, bench, and vertical jump.
Okay.
Yeah. We still do some overhead stuff, but with kids, it's just hard to watch. It's hard to spot. I don't really do Olympic lifts. I think that can be dangerous, in the weight room, because there's not enough people to watch, and kids don't necessarily have perfect technique, and those are very technical, complicated lifts. And
they like to throw things around.
Absolutely. So, it's like what happens is someone could break an arm trying to do a clean, or I just too risky. It's easy to teach someone how to squat. It's easy to teach someone how to bench. And like even deadlifts, they want to lift with their backs, and it's like, it takes a lot of time just to even get them to, do a trap bar deadlift correctly. Learning how to hinge with their hips, a hip hinge, or using their glutes. So a lot of it is teaching, but once, with football, on their squat days, they do work off of percentages. I have some bands in there. I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure the school, they said they were going to order some squat boxes and SSBs from here.
Okay.
So
that's good.
Yeah. I'm like, cause that's what we need. And
so you don't have squat boxes now. So then how are you teaching them? Cause it's an easier way to teach somebody to squat. So how are you going about that now?
Unfortunately, I have to use the benches that we have.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that's doable.
Yeah, it's doable, but I don't have a lot of equipment to work with quite yet. But yeah, so in their jumps, anybody can teach people how to increase a vertical jump, but when they are becoming faster and more explosive and running fast, their sprints are faster. That's when I'm like, okay, like we're doing something right here. It's honestly one of the most rewarding things, I think, is working with those kids and seeing how excited they get when they hit a squat PR or oh yeah, Coach Leah, I just did 300 for 5 reps on squat. I'm like, yeah, I saw. That's amazing. It's a good feeling. And then just to see them perform better on the field, on the mat, on the court. Yeah, they're buying into it too, which is the biggest part.
How long have you been doing this?
About a year now.
Okay.
About a year.
Have your, I don't want to say seniors because it's leadership class, right? So the ones that you've been working with longer, are they now to a point to where they're able to help the ones coming in?
Yes, they are. I even, some of the ones who are a little more farther along, because, you know, you'll have your really great athlete and then you'll have someone who's middle of the road. You know, whether it's a sophomore or a junior, some of them will even help those ones who are lacking a little bit. But yeah, the senior class is able to help a little more. If I can get them to focus, because you know how they get that senioritis and they're like, but it's actually a lot of the younger classmen who I think are really into learning more, wanting to learn more about it, and who are interested in sports performance. And some of them have even asked that I start a powerlifting team for this school. And so yeah, it's actually a lot of the sophomores and juniors who are really into it.
So are they working in groups? Like, how are you controlling them screwing off in between sets?
They do have to work in groups. Honestly, the best thing that can happen for us to ensure that they're not screwing around is just to have their coaches there, their head coaches there. I know I'm not loud and scary. They listen to me, but I think to have their other coaches there keeping an eye on them. I will write programming and send it out to all the coaches so they know what we're doing. That keeps them locked in a little more than.
So the coaches have been compliant.
Yeah, the coaches have been compliant, which is really been helpful.
Yes.
After, you know, you get them to buy in. I had a coach tell me, I don't want my players bench pressing. And I said, why? And he goes, well, their shoulders. And I said, well, then if they're using their shoulders, they're not bench pressing right. I'm like, these baseball players need to bench press. You know, this is going to increase their bat speed, you know, everything. They need to bench press. Yeah. So really, it's just an educational thing for a lot of these coaches. And
well, aside from that, they're going to do it anyhow because everybody has a home gym anymore.
Exactly.
So if you're not teaching them, they're going to learn in somebody's garage in really bad form.
Exactly.
So
exactly. And the students there, they have access to the Norwood Rec Center. So I don't know what goes on there, but I know that some of them go lift, and I'm like, I just hope they're using good technique. And that's one of the things you have to teach them too before they start taking off with some programming is, are you guys able to do this correctly? And a lot of them don't know how to use their backs. You know, a lot of them don't want to touch their chest when they bench. It's like, let's figure this out now while we're young.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, you know, you don't hurt yourself later. And that's one of the things too, is the injury prevention of it. You know, I just don't go in there and make them do all these compound movements and jump a little and then let them go. Like, I try to teach them, like, hey, I explain to them, this is what's going to help your ankles. This is going to help your stability here. This is going to strengthen your back. To try and teach them, like, hey, this is also injury prevention while we're working out and training. And sometimes when they hear that, they're like, okay. Luckily, knock on wood, I haven't had a single injury in the weight room or weight room related, and I hope to keep it that way. Just keeping my eye on them and making sure that they aren't overdoing it or doing anything with really bad form.
Yeah. So with that influx of the junior high kids, how did you manage that? Because all their brains are still developing, right? So that's at a different developmental phase.
Yeah. They actually were really excited. And whenever I, did a little introduction and we talked about things, they're like, well, we have a question. I said, okay, sure. And one kid said, are you really the strongest woman ever? Because we're telling everybody.
Yeah. So how's that? I mean, when they look that up, then what's that conversation look like?
They're like, really? They're like, well, what are your numbers? And I'm like, how do you, it's hard to explain equip lifting to middle school kids. So you just tell them and then you're like, think that you are, a goddess, like that you are like a celebrity. So honestly, I think that's helped me and played a big part in them just listening to me, because of that reason, because of my background with powerlifting. They're like, whoa, she is really strong. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah. So let's go down that rabbit hole. How do you explain equip lifting to people?
It's always
not the kids, but just in general.
I tell them we wear suits and shirts that help protect our joints and essentially give us more of an overload so we can lift more. I'm like, we're still lifting the weight. It's just we're not lifting it without this extra protection. Yeah.
So then how do you explain that to other powerlifters that think that the gear just gives you all this free extra weight?
I would tell them to jump into some gear and give it a shot. You see a lot of people who bounce back and forth from raw to equipped, and they're their squat stance is like the same as their raw squat stance. And I'm just like, I just want to widen your stance a little bit. Like, you can do it. You may feel weird at first. Let's do some box squats first, but you can do it and you're going to get more out of this gear. But a lot of people just don't want to switch that stuff up. Equipped lifting is like poetry. It's hard. And once you figure it out, it's like, it's beautiful. It's one of the best feelings because you're like, oh, that's how that should feel. And you may go 3, 4, 5 sessions and never feel that feeling. And then you're like, there it is. That's the one.
Well, there's very little room for error.
There's no room for error.
Yes.
Like I said, in that bar, if you don't know how to use your equipment correctly, it's going to throw you around. It's going to, you could die. Appropriate spot.
How did you mentally navigate that? Because it can be frustrating, or there's an awesome side to it as well. Yeah. Because when you do hit it, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, right? That was really freaking cool.
The trick is to consistently hit it, which isn't always the case. So how did you navigate? Did you find that as a challenge that you loved, or a challenge that was so frustrating and you want to beat your head against the wall?
I loved it. I love looking at my videos from like my first few squats full gear to, how I ended. I was like, what a progression that was. But no, I loved it because it's like you learn something new every single day. You learn how to use that gear optimally and what's best for you. And I loved that challenge.
How did you go about doing that? Learning the gear optimally?
Aside from really good training partners and a really great coach, was studying my own videos and watching, you or Louie or Laura.
So with your own videos, what are you watching? Are you watching bar path or joint angles?
Joint angles, bar path, all of that. I would study my videos endlessly. It was almost, just to make sure that I had it right, but I would study them. Even if I didn't post them, I would slow motion, you name it. Like, if I see something in my squat, like, why did my knee come in a little bit right there? Like, was I what's going on here? Is my stance off? Am I too far into the bar? I would literally everything. I would just study my videos.
How important would you say the start is?
The pickup
of the squat, or even the bench, before the lift even begins, because the lift begins before it begins.
Yeah. No, it's the most important part. Because if you don't have everything locked in or, dialed in the way you want it, or if you have a shitty pickup, you're going to have a shitty squat. That's just my belief. Like, it starts in the beginning. It starts with the pickup. It starts with, when you take the bar out on the bench press, it has to be perfect and you cannot rush it. You can't rush it. A lot of people want to rush their bench press. And, when you have heavy weights, you see the bar just moving and waving and like a pendulum. I'm like, just let it settle for a second, feel it and then start the lift. And that, it'll probably be 50% better. If you did that.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's the most important part.
So with the squat, for your pick, what tactical cueing were you using to know that you're in the right? Because you've seen people try to pick 3-4 times, right?
Oh yeah.
You're not going to pick until you're exactly where it needs to be. How do you know that you were exactly where you needed to be?
Usually whenever I would set up, everything was always the same. It was a routine. I think that's how most lifters are. I would, get my hands right. I would put my chest to the bar, and then I would always kind of know when I would look down where my feet should be while under the bar. And sometimes even I've had episodes where I would try and pick up. I'm like, oh, I'm too far forward. Shimmy my feet back a little bit. Because, whenever you're setting up, when you're kind of under, you might move your feet around a little to make sure you're planted. But usually I would be able to make like visual cues to myself, like, okay, this is where the bar is. This is where my feet should look under the mono. Usually I could feel it when I tried to pick up, because it's like you do it so many times, you know what a good pickup feels like versus, oh yeah, let me put that back down a little bit. Like even before you lift it off, like, you pick it up off the mono, the hooks, you're like, okay, yeah, then that's all right.
Yeah, see, that's an experience thing. Because if you go back years, you were like, oh, screw it, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And then you keep going.
Yep. But for me, it was always visual, like the setup, and where my feet should be, like when I'm up against the bar looking down. Like that's it. Like, okay, that's perfect. That's how I always did it.
What about the bench?
Well, that took a little time to figure out. But honestly, it would be the same. I would set up, get my grip wherever I wanted to, trigger finger on the ring as far as I could go with it being legal. Getting up on my traps, and I would make sure that like my eyes were under the bar. Actually, no, it was my nose or my chin. But probably about right here had to be under the bar. And that was the same thing. And my handler always knew like when to lift me off and where to put me. Cause I would try to fight it, cause they would try to put me a little further. I'm like, I can feel myself fighting it, but it's like, once you trust your handler, whoever's giving you that handoff, they're going to put you in the right spot to touch.
Yes. When did you know to lower it?
When I was settled. I would let it settle, and I would feel that weight in my arms, make sure my back was set before I would lower it. I would never, you would rush it, and it's like, then you get flat chested, you just can't do that. You have to make sure everything's just settled in perfect. You kept your tightness. One of the things that cues I always give is like suction cup yourself to the bench with your butt and your shoulders. And that seemed to always really help. But yeah, it was just letting it settle, even if it's just for a quick second and a half. And you're like, okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Then how has being a meet director been? You look into this guy. Well, you're on the other side, right? It's different now, right?
Honestly, if you are, I would rate it as lifting is the easiest thing you could do, being a competitor. Handling, second hardest. Meet director is the hardest thing I think I've done. A lot of work goes into it, that behind the scenes stuff that you just didn't think would. Did it change your perspective of the sport? No, I think it gave me a little bit of a more respect for all those meet directors. But also I think my perspective, of course, like I love it still, and I love watching everyone. It was cool to be on the other side, to see everyone, how excited everybody gets. Cause when you are a competitor, you're so caught up in your own shit that you just don't really take the time to watch everyone. But also, how excited people were just over like, a best lifter prize, or how grateful they are that you put thought into some of the stuff that you did. I had an IV therapy there for post weigh-ins. Food truck was there for it. I had some really nice like best lifter prizes, just like random things put together. And it's just like how grateful everyone was that they had a good time. It just makes you feel really good. Like it was a success.
Yes.
Definitely something I'm looking to do more of. I've actually had I talked to Laura about it for a really long time, and I've had some people reach out, and we're looking to, this is maybe the first time anybody hears of it, a men's pro-am. Eventually be able to build that in Florida. So I think that would be really cool. I don't know how many competitors would do it initially, but it's something, of course, that you have to grow like any other meet. But I think that would be a fun weekend. If we could make it anything like the women's pro-am, it would be a really good time.
Well, that didn't start very big either.
Yeah.
The women's pro-am.
It was like 30 lifters.
It grew into something very big.
Yeah.
Which is good. Were there any topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
I don't think so. I think that we had a really good chat. This was fun. I was very nervous. But now I'm like, okay, yeah. Like I said, I was like, I sound kind of sexy in these headphones. I was like, all right. But no, this was a good time, and I appreciate you having me on.
How can people follow you?
My Instagram is just Leah Reichman. Or there is, I don't really do TikTok or anything like that, but mostly just active on Instagram. All
right. Well, we were talking earlier about having you and Laura both out at the same time, which would be, definitely a fun time. So I'm looking forward to that.
I think that would be great.
I want to thank you for coming out. This has been great.
I appreciate it.
Any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having me out here. It's always a good time being in here. It's like the powerlifting mecca. Yeah, but
this is different though. Usually when you're out here, you're training, right?
Exactly.
So it's way different.
It is. But no, I really appreciate it. It was great. It was really great talking to you.
No, it was you too as well. Thank you for coming out. And guys, we're done. All right, guys, we got new limited edition apparel. There's 2 designs, as with all the limited edition apparel. It's only while supplies last. This is the Blue Illusion tee, so I guess you can act like you're stronger than you really are. It's an illusion. And the other one, work harder, not lazier, or you could just work really, really hard at being lazy. Doesn't matter to me. All that matters to me is that you support the podcast. So hit the link in the description or go to elitefts.com, and on the homepage, scroll down, you're going to see limited edition apparel. Click on there. Pick up your limited edition apparel today. Help support the podcast. Thank you.
I think most of us would agree that getting a coach is a great step forward that an athlete can make to make greater progress. What if you had a whole bunch of coaches and a whole bunch of driven elite level athletes and like-minded people all in your corner trying to make you better? That's exactly what you're going to get with the Table Talk Discord crew.
Would I join again? Absolutely. And I will continue to be a member of the Discord group as long as it's active. I've been a big fan of Table Talk over the last couple of years. It's one of my top podcasts that I listen to. So once Dave Tate announced that there would be a Discord crew, it was a no-brainer for me to join. It's been overwhelmingly positive experience. One of the biggest benefits of being in the Discord crew, form checks. I work out in my garage by myself. I don't have people to cue me, to correct me, to coach me, anything like that. So being able to hop on the Discord, post my videos, and having elite top-level powerlifters and coaches able to give me real-time feedback that, hey man, you need to tweak this, you need to work on this, do some more accessories here, has been a huge benefit. I've seen my progression as a lifter make jumps just because of that. There's so much info on the Discord group for the members, thousands of articles, tons of ebooks, and really the best thing about it, it's like you're back in the gym, you're busting other people's balls sometimes. At the same time, you're getting really good information. It's been a blessing for me this last year, and I really recommend it.